What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday live stream, and today we have on the one and only Rookie Reefer. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks, man. How are we all? Actually, I'm not the best. This morning, I must admit, had a bit of a drama. I
What happened?
busted I busted my last pair of pluggers.
Oh my goodness.
I know, 3 pairs in the last 2 weeks. And now I've got to go to the shops during the corona. Just
Okay, wait.
not good.
What are pluggers?
Pluggers, okay. Thongs.
Mm,
And no, not underwear.
okay.
I'm not that rough.
You're not that rough on them. Those last a
No.
little longer.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so Rookie, my best reefing Australian buddy, got the pooch in the background. He's part of the stream. Perfect. So how's
Yeah,
things?
she just gets nervous every time she's away from me now. She's getting old, so she'd just prefer to be in here, I think, anyway. So let it be.
Yeah, that
Sorry
works.
if it's distracting.
Oh, not at all. Orion likes to make guest appearances all the time too. It works. So today I figured we would talk about quarantining. We talked about quarantining fish in the past, but not so much about corals. So quarantining, dipping, all that stuff to keep those nasty pests out of your tank. And you, sir, have many tanks behind you, some of which are quarantine tanks.
Now, this is correct, and I want to preface this with that I'm no professional preface. You guys say preface, something like that. Actually, sorry to go on a tangent, but Than from Tidal Gardens, last time I was watching one of his videos, we say pergola. He says pergola. I literally fell on the ground laughing. Some of the differences are just amazing. But yes, I just want to clarify the way I've decided to quarantine my coral is not quarantine. Technically, quarantine is a separate area locked away from everything to keep all the bad guys in one
Yeah.
room away from obviously display tanks. Now,
Mhm.
this is my main frag tank. As you can see, that's a quarantine and that's a
Yeah.
quarantine. That's within 2 foot proximity. So it's you
Okay,
have to
okay.
decide.
This
You have
isn't
to
a lab.
decide.
This is like hobbyist level. We're okay.
Yeah. But it's more so when you first start quarantining, you have to decide how dedicated you're going to be, what level you're going to go to. And when I started, I was trying to do it the best way I could. Obviously, I've only got one room that I wanted to keep tanks in to keep it easy to aircon
Mhm.
and whatnot. But it's it makes it a little bit difficult because then you go, okay, well, now I'm not so much quarantining corals to keep parasites out. I'm more so quarantining corals because when I first started, I let a few things slip through, and then things devastated tanks, which you have to pull down for and bubble algae. Now, some of these things aren't so bad nowadays.
Mhm.
Uh, we're getting some cures with some of the algae and whatnot, but still, vermitid snails over here in Australia anyway are something that has shut down a lot of tanks before. So if you can keep them things out of a tank,
Yep.
then bonus. And even better, it's one of them things where if you go through a bit of a crisis and you have something come from something like that, it's
Mhm.
quite easy to convince your better half that I should be quarantining. And hence, these quarantine tanks aren't really quarantines anymore. They're almost displays. Like that quarantine tank had no corals added to it in at least 6 months.
Mhm.
This tank here is where I just stash everything, and that's why that one's building up so much. So
Yeah. Now, speaking of vermitid snails, what's your solution to get rid of them? You just break them off? Do you glue them? What do you do?
look, they're buggers because as soon as you have a tank that's not just one system, they're going to be in the plumbing,
Mhm.
and that's where you'll find your issues. So I have not successfully eradicated vermitins without pulling down a system. Put it
Really?
that way.
Okay.
Not pulling down a system as in taking the whole thing down, but I've put the coral in a different tank, literally pulled all the overflow out and gone to town on it, and that worked. But at the same time, it's so easy to reintroduce. So
Yeah.
yeah, they can be so small, and yeah. Anyway, well, you kind of what's your dealings with quarantine? You've never done it. You were
I've quarantined fish. I've dipped coral. I've never really quarantined coral, so that's a little bit of a new one. I think about it, that I should be doing it. I know you're doing it, so this is kind of works out well. um,
well. The one good thing was when I first got into the hobby, I did a lot of research, so I wanted to try to do it right. So that first quarantine over there has been set up since my first tank has been set up. I've never pulled it down. So that's a one good thing too, because quarantine can be a struggle with keeping things stable. So the longer you can have a tank up, obviously, the more beneficial it is.
yeah, no, it's true. Okay, so how long if you get? Actually, here's a random question. This isn't really coral specifically, but they're saying how long should I quarantine invertebrates for? Do you quarantine inverts too?
Yeah, no, 100%. I'll put inverts in. Look, that's a highly debated topic, and I don't think anyone actually really has concrete evidence. So some people do 30 days, some people do 8 weeks, some people do 3 months. It's one of them things where what you feel comfortable with. I would be personally, I wouldn't be doing any less than 2 months, just because some of these problems, and that's not so much for ick, but that's some of these problems that arise do take a little bit of time, especially if the LFS where you've got the piece has, say, for instance, knocked most of the vermin and snails off, apart from one in a little groove, and that takes a while to populate the bottom of that coral, but they grow pretty quick.
Yeah, you're making me question now. I know there's a few on my rock full of those citric mushrooms.
There is this.
I broke a bunch off in the other tank before I took it out, but
just this quarantine alone,
yeah,
in the last 6 months. Now, this may be a little bit different than most people's scenarios, because in America, I noticed that a lot of stuff is frags. And yes, that is becoming a thing in Australia, but at the same time, it's still pretty available as long as you're willing to pay for colonies. So are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
just background. Yeah. Anyway, it blanked out. Where was I? That just completely. Yeah, with colonies
versus colonies.
With colonies, there's a lot more problems. You will have a lot more places for things to hide. Say a big colony of acans, that's a lot of rock that you have underneath. Big colonies of acros can hide acro eating flatworms even easier. Like it's just one of them things where if you have frags and if you're only getting one or two at a time, it's quite an easy thing to monitor. You can kind of fast track your quarantine in that process. But in a tank where that's literally got probably 25 colonies of acans as well as everything else, I'd be doing 3 months.
Really, eh? So you do 3 months in general?
Yeah.
That's pretty solid. That's a long time. I thought about just setting up a little like 5-gallon on my desk, but that's almost too tiny for months and months of coral to manage.
It's a commitment. And that's where I would say definitely don't start a quarantine and go buy 100 pieces and stick it in there. You're not going to have much luck. Stability of these tanks is 100% crucial. Your display tank is exactly what you're aiming for, so that's what you should be aiming for with your quarantine. A 2-week-old tank doesn't have a great bio load, all that kind of jazz. So it's asking for trouble.
So on that note, I just moved in Zoas so far. I think I had one Duncan in there now, but just slowly moving stuff into my new frag tank. And then I spent copious amounts of time peroxide dipping all my Zoas the last day or two, just to hopefully kill off any algae or any nasties that are potentially on them.
I was about to tell you a dirty little secret, your H2O2 secret.
Tell me more.
No, that you've been dipping all your stuff. Look, we all struggle, and that's what people don't understand. I think that even the big guys struggle with these issues, and once you get, whether it be algae, whether it be pests, and once you get it into a large scale system, it's something that's basically impossible to get rid of.
Yeah.
So the more we can monitor these things, and look, the more you can educate yourself and as I said at the start, I am in no way a professional. I'm no way an expert at all this. I've learned what I've learned, and I research what I research. But it's so easy to identify all the basic. I've got a list of the basic kind of 8 critters that you'd want to keep out of your tank, to, and then you can make sure you have a successful reef tank.
All right, what's your top 8 pests? What do you got for us?
Just wait, man. We've got to go through the list first, all
Okay,
right?
okay,
So,
just make me wait.
yeah.
You're like,
Uh, so-
I got this list I spent, but you don't get to know what it is.
no, no, no.
Yeah.
This is insider information. Not even Dev knows about this. No, he didn't
No,
think I
no,
was
no.
that organized, but I made sure I put down some dot points just so
That's
we. It's very easy to go on a tangent with you. I enjoy having a chat, and
always always fun.
your normal streams are about an hour, and our streams are normally 3. So let's not do that again.
Yeah. Well,
But
we'll shoot for an hour-ish. So
so what
one
you go?
thing
You
I'm
go,
gonna
son.
throw out there quickly, because I posted that little video of a bunch of zoas like bubbling in peroxide, and I had about a million, well, probably like 20 people ask me what ratio to water. It was 100% peroxide. It was just dump it in, you put it in for 1 to 2 minutes, and all the zoas are fine. And yeah, don't leave it in for 25 minutes, but 1 to 2 minutes is perfectly fine, and it's gonna kill all the algae. You know, if there's any funky bacteria on the zoas, all that type of stuff. So, I've never actually. I did try it. I tried it on a frog spawn and a Duncan, and so far they both seem fine as well. So I'm tempted to just
Look, it's just
try
an
it on everything.
oxidizer. So at the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's a lot of people are scared to try, I guess, and this is one of the places I do benefit when I have the space. My local store, Reef Stock, refurbished, should I say? Jeez, I'm off with the fairies. Has a lot of corals out the back, which said I could try stuff on. So I'm gonna maybe try and make a dip or something like that, and just kind of test the waters. For sure.
You're like, I'm by no means a professional, yet I'm developing my own dip for superior
No,
pest
no.
protection.
Hey, there's a lot of stuff that I need to learn. That's for sure. It's just this hobby is kind of something that you're all in or you're not.
And you're always going to be learning in this hobby, so
And that doesn't need to mean that it takes up 100% of your time, but at the same time, you have to be interested in keeping these animals and creatures alive. And for the long term, we take them out of the ocean. Let's just face it, I am so glad that we have that option, but it's the wrong thing to do. As we wouldn't, let's not go into that, but let's just make sure we're doing the best. And that's where we're in an age where even when I started, the information was a lot harder to get. There's so much better information out there nowadays. So if you're willing to actually learn,
yep.
you'll do.
No, 100% agreed. Okay, so now, so I know most people don't have a quarantine tank for corals. Most people dip corals, at least hopefully they do. Now on the dipping front, do you have any current kind of go-to dips, or do you find certain ones work better than others?
Yeah, look, there's a few different situations where I'd be dipping corals. It depends on exactly what you're trying to succeed with. Obviously, you can dip corals if they're unhealthy. You can dip corals when they're freshly coming in to get bugs and pests off. They're kind of a completely different scenario. Obviously, everyone knows iodine. Providine iodine is something where I use quite a bit. Seachem Reef Dip is a nice basic,
Iodine one?
nice easy one
Yep.
to follow exactly how much to use. I've had no problem. Yeah, exactly. Look, Reef Dip is something where I wouldn't hesitate to leave basically 90% of corals in for half an hour. Now, some people may say that's absolutely ridiculous. I haven't lost corals from it, so I can only say at my own personal experience. But something I was looking into is actually betadine. So I've got to look into exactly what the coloring is in this, because it is a red. but it's just basically providine iodine with ethanol. Now, ethanol I think could have some quite a few benefits with certain corals. Obviously, you're not going to be dipping smooth skin acros in it, but
That's probably the only coral I wouldn't dip is the smooth skin acro. Every time I've dipped them, they just bite the dust on me. So it's the
yeah.
one that just, they don't do it. Not worth it.
Now, I'll be 100% honest. I've only owned two in my life, and both of them have bit the dust because I had a massive tank crash in one of my quarantines, which was my own fault. Killed like $600 worth of acros. And that was like $600 4 years ago. That's like a good $2,000 worth now.
That was probably all A cans, so it'd be like $5,000 for us here.
Yeah. I'd be devastated if I lost that tank. It has some nice ones in it at the moment. But no, I've just recently been using Revive. I've never really tried that one before. It works pretty well. I also have another iodine dip based one. It is a little bit expensive, but it's actually Brightwell. Yeah, Brightwell
nice.
Coral dip, Medicoral.
Nice.
Obviously, hydrogen peroxide. We have witch hazel, just in case you have apparently, look, RTN. I haven't dealt with it since I've had this bottle, so that's kind of touch wood, lucky. So I don't actually have an experience in that one, but that information is real easy to find. Apparently can stop RTN on acros, which is rapid tissue necrosis.
Does it work? Does it actually work though?
Hey, anecdotally, plenty of people have used it before and had success. The one thing that's hard to determine in this hobby is everyone always wants to look for a reason for something happening, and there normally is, but they'll blame it on the first thing that they think, and quite often it's pretty far off.
Yeah.
So everything happens for a reason, obviously, but everyone's saying, "Oh, these snails ate my coral." Well, no, they just ate the rotted tissue.
Dead flesh.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of route. But this one, actually, I haven't used in a while because it's quite hard to get. It's called Coral Protect. Sorry about the reflection. It's made in the Netherlands. It's only a small little bottle, but you only have to use a mil. And the reason why I haven't used it is because I've got stuff all left. But I was using this at the start. And hey, it may have been just me being like, oh, new time reefer, this is working so well. But this is one of the ones that I always had the most luck with.
Nice. Okay, so one nasty thing that somehow stuck it on a frag that I had to deal with a while ago was activating flatworms. That sucked. Now that was a marathon to get rid of those. That was, I literally every week I like dipped every coral in that frag tank. It was so much work. It was like a good hour or two, but I'm like, and every week I swap dips. So one week I use like the Polyp Lab potassium salt. Next week I use Coral RX. Next week I use Revive. Next week I use Bear. I literally went through like every dip that I had and try to like do the whole round, and eventually got them, but it was like 5-6 weeks of like weekly dipping and pain in the arse.
Again, anecdotally, but there's a guy in Australia that has a massive SPS tank, and he's obviously dealt with the issue many times before. Now, I don't think he's disclosed the information on how to, he said he knows exactly, he's worked out how to do it, but he hasn't disclosed the information on how to just get all your fish and inverts out of your tank and run it in your whole tank. But I know for a fact he uses a KCI dip, so potassium chloride. Now, normal levels of that in the reef tank are about right around 400. 700 will apparently kill fish. Now, you want to be running in this dip around 1,500.
I think.
Parts per million.
I think
so.
Okay.
Sorry.
No.
As you said, the potassium salt ones would definitely have something to do with that. And Chris from ACI Aquaculture, I heard him saying that he was using a potassium dip. I'm not sure if that was related, but he definitely said he'd share more information on that. As I said, we're in the time where a lot of people are experimenting and trying new things, so a lot of information is coming out. But definitely potassium chloride at 15,000 parts per million. Apparently just you get 2 grams. I think it's 2 grams per liter of solid potassium chloride put it in the water, and that will make about the solution you need, and do that for roughly 2.5, 3 weeks, and that's 100% success rate.
Really nice. Good to know.
As I said,
Yeah.
anecdotally, it's just something that I definitely would try myself if
Yeah.
I came up with the issue.
I probably would. I'm so paranoid about them now after dealing with them once. Never again. There's I tried that flatworm purge stuff, but it didn't fare well for me. Like I'd lost a bunch of corals and the whole tank was just angry. And then what actually did work was just lots of effort
A-
of persistent dipping.
And that's the other thing that we didn't kind of touch on before. If you can keep some of these issues out of your main tank,
Mm-hmm.
it's
You mean like dealing with it in a quarantine tank before it ever touches your display?
precisely correct. Funny you should say that, Devin. Now, like
Crazy.
I first wanted to touch on kind of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, quarantine system can be as basic or as lush as you want the thing to be. It can
Mm-hmm.
be amazing or it can be full blown light and a pump. So, what are your thoughts on that? Where would you go?
My most basic quarantine tank ever was for about a month. And it wasn't even really quarantine. It was more I just couldn't fit the coral in my tank because I only had a 30-gallon at the time. And I was waiting for my upgrade. But I had a couple like big chunks of like branching, whatever the acro, I don't remember what it was anymore, but living inside of a 5-gallon bucket with a heater and a power head and an XR15 about it. And it lived in there for a good month. And every few days, I just gave it like a 50% water change because I'm like, well, I'm not going to dose it. So I'm just going to do a water change. Yeah, so that was interesting. But it worked.
But there, XR15, I hear that and I hear expensive. So
Well, I already had it. So,
it's one of them things where everyone says it's cost too much. I don't have the space. You can do it in an 80 liter. So what's that? 20
20
gallon.
gallon.
I would
Yeah.
suggest a 20-gallon system at least for a quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
Now that doesn't have much of a footprint. You can set that thing up. If you're in America, like I'm sure many of the people watching are, you get the dollar per gallon, whatever it is, bloody cheap,
Yep.
run out the door deal. You get a system for 20 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
You need, I would have as a basic, you need a half decent light. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I say half decent, I don't mean an Ecotech.
Mm-hmm.
I just mean an Ocean Revive, a Viper Spectre, something like this that you can get for under 200 bucks.
Yep.
So you're not investing too much. It's a piece of equipment that you're going to have for the next 3 or 4 years at least. That's going to kind of at least do, although maybe not with my one. I won't go into that, but so all you need as well as that is a little in-tank pump or a hang on the back filter.
Yep.
These are basic things. You can get a hang on the back filter for what? 20 bucks?
20 bucks cheap.
20 bucks. So you've got, let's say 180 for your light, 20 for that. You've got 20 for a tank. And what else?
Super. Well, my little 5-gallon one I was using for the nudies, I got the tank for free. I think I gave some 20 bucks for an LED strip light. I'm like, oh, this might be my quarantine tank. I'm into it for like less than 30 bucks.
Exactly correct. And that's the thing. There's so much secondhand equipment. You can probably find yourself a system for under $100. Now, and I'm seriously not trying to brag because coral has just gotten expensive. I'm not trying to be an idiot, but there's not a single piece of coral in that tank that's worth under $100.
Yeah.
And there's probably a good 100 and something pieces in there. So you get to that stage and it's 100% worth quarantining because
if one thing gets in and destroys all your coral, how much is investment, time, money, all those animals are all gone, right?
So a list of the things that this tank has caught in the last 6 months, not even 6 months. Now, admittedly, I get way too impatient, and that's one of my excuses. I just keep on getting coral, and so I have to restart my quarantine step. I have to. It's not something where you can add a coral and then be like, oh, I'm still 2 months through my quarantine process. I would consider it as soon as you add a new piece, whether it be a snail, whether it be a coral, no matter how small or big, that process has kick-started. So ideally, when you're in the first steps of quarantining, that's why I said earlier, you're better to just get the 10, 15 pieces that you want at once, maybe just 10, keep it on the lower side, 15 if you're a bit more experienced, run them through a quarantine, get them in your system ASAP, and then you can get some new corals, because I do the complete opposite and it's a nightmare. I keep on adding and then I add problems to all these corals, and it's do as I say, not as I do.
So when you come home from your store with the new coral, take your old ones out and then put the new ones in.
As long as they've gone through the process and you're happy with that, then yeah. Yep. And as I said, that's kind of something that you have to be comfortable with. You want to quarantine corals for a week, go ahead. That's at least, it's better than nothing. You're still gonna, the one main thing that I definitely emphasize is keep it simple and try not to pack the tank, because I've done the opposite and problems just hide. So if you can keep 10 pieces 30 centimeters away from each other, which is 12 inches for your American, which should just change already. Apparently, anyone else in the world can work it out in reverse. When you say
30 centimeters equals American, 12 inches equals a foot.
Can't do. Yes, it's pretty simple, but if you could keep them that distance apart, obviously visually checking them, inspecting them, that's what we're trying to do. Inspect the corals. You want to pick them up. You want to check underneath. If it's on a frag plug and you want to take it off the frag plug, if it's easy enough, I would suggest doing so. A lot of stuff can hide underneath that frag plug. And dips are only so successful. It's something where you're never going to kill every single bristleworm with a dip. You're never going to kill every brittle star with a dip. Like all these things.
Would a dip kill vermitid snail, or are they survivors?
I shouldn't say never, because if you sat one in straight dip for an hour, I'm sure it would die. Yeah. But with the ratios that we dip at and the time periods that we dip at, you're never going to successfully eradicate 100% of pests. It's not going to happen. So that's why we quarantine, because dips are not 100% successful. And I'll go on the record with that.
That's fair.
100 times. Your coral's going to die before you kill all the stuff in that thing. I can guarantee it, and I've seen it time and time again.
Well, the other thing is, too, if with a lot of little creatures, like flatworms, for instance, a dip won't kill the eggs, right? They'll kill the flatworm, but they won't kill the eggs. So that's exactly part of the point of quarantining is, give it time for it to hatch and grow up. You see it, then you can maybe dip it again or deal with it in whatever way.
And that's part of quarantine. It's not just setting up a tank. It's not just having it sitting there, putting corals in there, letting them sit there for 2 months, and then sticking them in your tank. That's not quarantining at all. Quarantining is observing, doing something about problems, issues that arise, and obviously getting informed, being informed, knowing what to look out for. When I was first in the hobby, I didn't 100% understand what vermitid snails were, and that's how they got through my system. So it's as easy as understanding the basics. Go Google top 10 pests. I have here as I said before earlier, a list of the eight things that I've caught in this tank just in the last probably 3 months. Now we've got bubble algae. That's a basic. Bryopsis, when I first set up this tank, that's what it was set up for. Asterina stars, caught them. Monty eating nudies, currently battling with them. Bobbit. Actually, people wonder how they get this 6-foot bobbit worm in their reef tank, because they put this little tiny coral in your tank. Guess what? We're little once too. So are bobbit worms. so this little bobbit worm is going in your tank, and that thing will grow and grow and grow. And meanwhile, I didn't put a 6-foot bobbit worm in my tank. No, you didn't. But you put a little 3-centimeter one in there. Bobbit worms are one that I definitely watch out for. A Eunice worm. They're fish eaters. Anyone that hasn't seen the videos, documentaries on them, that's something you need to watch. It's amazing. We have also Vermilion snails, caught them straight up in that. And that's one thing that I want to touch on. Vermilion snails aren't just, they're a category pretty much. It's not just one thing. So
Mhm.
you're not just looking for a brown tubular thing. You're looking for anything with that uniform
Little
neck on it.
stem.
Pretty I'd say that's one of the determining features is that uniform stem. You have a
Yep.
lot of white beneficial filter feeders, and they'll have kind of a trumpet
Hmm.
end on them. They're fine.
Yeah.
Anything that has a uniform thing. Now, I've had these in purple, I've had them in clear, I've had them in white, and I've had them in the normal brown kind of color. So,
Hmm.
and also almost a black. So
Yeah.
it's not something where you can just go, okay, brown vermilion snails, that's something to look out for. Just
Hmm.
make sure you look at the details of the swirly base and whatnot. But vermilion snails are one thing you want to keep out of your tank.
You're
That
making me
is,
paranoid now because I think I broke a bunch off. There might be some on that mushroom
look,
rock I
if
added.
they're in your system, they're in your system. As I said, it's basically impossible. If you can keep up with snapping them off,
Hmm.
making sure you literally get the base of them, because if you leave a little bit of the base, they can grow back. So
Mm.
it's
See, in the past, I've broken them off. I never had a bunch, but I've had the odd one. Or and some people say the super glue over them.
so I'd always I'd always suggest some tools, right? So you have obviously a big pair there, but these little I forget what they're called. They're like locking. They're for cutting off arteries and stuff when they're doing operations. Anyway, these guys are awesome for taking vermilion snails off. You can actually get into the base, where even if it's in the little crack of a rock or something, you can get
Hmm.
right in there and actually make sure you get the base. But anything along the lines of prodding and poking, you just got to make sure you get the whole thing out. But
Well, would calc paste
also,
work?
I've never tried,
Hmm.
but that is something I have heard again.
Hmm.
Very possibly could, obviously, like, yeah, Aptasia X is possibly
Calc
would
paste.
work as well. A lot of people just glue them up, but as I said, once it's in your system, it's so hard to get out because it's in the plumbing. As
Yeah.
soon as it gets in the plumbing, as soon you can take it off every single coral, and you
Hmm.
won't be. It'll come straight back. So.
Yeah.
But also, before we go on, that wasn't quite 8 things. So I also found, believe it or not, and I found this last night. Oh, sorry, I nearly swore, but it's nearly climbed up the side of the thing. And in this little tub right here, you won't be able to see it. It's too small.
What is it?
But I vouch on my life, it's there. So it's a turrid. It's a
Hmm.
Turidae or a Conidae, which are a toxic. Same family
I
as
don't.
cone snails.
I don't even know what it is. What's it called?
It's the family of cone snails.
Okay. Hmm.
You know, like the ones that shoot poisonous darts
Oh,
and
really?
kill you, and
That's
are really toxic and kill you.
no
Well, yeah, there's one right there.
crazy. I didn't know
So
they shot darts at you and were poisonous. Huh.
no, I picked it up out of the tank and put it in a little thing. Oh, what's that? A little snail.
Did you get speared?
No, luckily enough, I didn't. And admittedly, the family is pretty broad.
Hmm.
There's about 50 species, but on the broadness of the whole family, this one's
Hmm.
like right next to the cone snail. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
There you go. Nice.
interesting.
I know.
So, that's definitely beneficial to keep out of your tank, I would assume.
That's fair. Fair enough.
Yeah,
Now,
pretty sure. And
okay.
that wasn't 8 things, but I lied. It was only 6.
So you got two more
But
for us?
I found other things, I swear.
Yep. Yeah, a couple of people were saying about the chat. It's kind of going sporadically, so I think there's something up with it right now. I kind of see a whole slew of messages and it stops, and a whole slew and it stops. I think something's funky with it. A-Town
The
said to say hi
chat's
to Rookie.
funky or
Yeah, I think
our
so.
video's
No,
funky?
we're good.
Okay, all right.
We're
As
good.
long
We're
as
good.
audio and video, hopefully we can keep people around anyway. I know, as I said, I'm no professional, but we can definitely go through this and talk through a few things that I've encountered along the way.
So what else what's been the worst one you've had to deal with so far?
Vermilions hand down. Although LPS, there we go. There's another one. LPS eating flatworms, flatworms.
Giving your LPS flack. LPS eating.
Yes.
Do they actually eat them, or are they just the ones that like smother them so they don't get light?
Well, they take little bite marks, so I'd assume they'd eat them.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were a bit of a pain to deal with, but one of them things where as long as you stay on top of it's not a one-time dip really ever with these pests. You got to do this through 2-3 weeks. As Devin was saying, he took him 5-6 weeks to get rid of acro eating flatworms.
Such a pain. So much work. So much work. Another thing that I'm going to do too, I kind of mentioned earlier that a lot of stuff can hide on the frag plugs. I think all the acros I move in, I think I'm just going to chop off the base and give them brand new plugs as they move into the new tank, just to make sure.
With stuff like acros that's so easy to get off a plug, I'd highly suggest just snapping it off. You got a little plating Monty, something like that, that's just, you wouldn't think that there'd be anything underneath in between the glue, but it's definitely a possibility and a high likelihood in my opinion. Yep. As soon as that's where I tend to find, and look, you may only find a couple bristleworms or something, but the more things you can keep out of your tank. Now that's something. Where do you stand on bristleworms?
I won't purposely add them because I don't know. At the end of the day, they're cleanup crew. I don't particularly like them. They're a bit creepy and little buggers spike me once in a while. I got off tons off the freaking Zoa plugs. I'm pulling them out. They're the very bottom of the plug. I'm like, you little punks. I'm just a little towel and dab them off and throw it in peroxide to kill whatever's left. But I eradicated many yesterday.
How about pods?
Pods in general, I'd say they're good.
In a quarantine, but
they're tiny, like a miniature microscopic cleanup crew.
They definitely are. They definitely are. But they can also be dirty buggers as well. Like I find that they bug the corals a little bit when you get them in not plague proportions, but when they're definitely up there.
Now, here's another really good one. How about fish in your quarantine tank?
I knew you'd ask this. Personally, I would not be quarantining coral in the same system as fish. Now, if you're just setting up for your first time, say you're setting up a new system, for instance, something along them lines, 100% go for it. That's exactly what I did, and that's a way to ensure that something else isn't being added into the tank. But the problem with that is, as much as I say I don't quarantine to keep ick out or anything like that, I do at the same time. So my belief is like ick's not going to fly through 4 foot of tank of airspace type of thing. So I think I'm pretty safe there. I've touch wood, never seen signs in my tank. But that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. Sorry. That's one thing to keep in mind is every time you're either adding a fish, you could be infecting them corals or vice versa.
So now I kind of see certain fish like wrasses as kind of like pest hunters. So in my mind, I think they'd be beneficial to have a small wrasse or two in a quarantine tank because if there is anything, they're going to pick it off and hopefully
100% it is. And it's only an ick off corals, but it's something that I've followed in my journey. So it is something where I'd feel uncomfortable. As I said, the first round, if it was one round and I was putting it straight in the tank, I'd do it. But I wouldn't leave a fish in there to be a utilitarian fish. It would obviously be beneficial. And if you were willing to have issues with that fish possibly, then that could be something that you look into. And I probably will in the future. But I just didn't want to give the fish anything by adding so much coral and that could have issues. As I said, it's something where I might be way too paranoid. I'm not saying that that's what you should do. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but
I'm contemplating the logistics of all this. Okay. So in theory, if you're worried about ick, the little torment could fall off and land on a hard surface and be chilling on there. I don't think it would likely be on a coral skeleton, but on like a frag plug or something, possibly.
Well, the problem is with a lot of these colonies, you will get some certain die off.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
inherently there will be live rock where that can settle, obviously. So
Yep.
that was my only thinking behind that. And as I said, it's been 100% precautious.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm probably doing too much, but I'd prefer to do that than the opposite way around and just have problems. And look, sometimes that's the only way you learn is doing it the other way and figuring it out, whether it is having a system up for 3 years. I've never seen a spotovic on my fish. That doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have it, but
Yep.
you can do that in your own mind and be comfortable. Good on you.
And if it's not an issue, then you're golden. So yeah, okay, it's interesting. So yeah, I would always, yeah, like at least my frag tank, all the stuff in my lagoon, all my little fish are going in that one. They're just moving across the room, but I purposely have 2 wrasses there as prevention.
See, the one reason why I've never had wrasses
Mm.
is just because they jump.
Yeah.
And look, as it all comes down to the thing where you've got to do the right thing by these creatures, whether it be coral, whether it be fish.
Mm-hmm.
We're 90% of fish anyway. Look, we're getting better nowadays with a lot of aquaculture stuff, but 90% of this stuff's taken from the oceans. We've got to try and do the right thing so the people watching in can see that, and they don't just think of us as all these fish dying and just a devastating thing. We can actually be a benefit rather than a negative.
So if you're worried about wrasses jumping, you can put a top on your tank.
Yes, I know, but it's one. I try and keep my systems as basic as I can, and this is what I'm struggling with at the moment. I'm building these acrylic things to sell on the market, and they're like these really, really nice boxes. They're beautiful, but
Pristine
they're quite
acrylic
expensive.
manufacturing. Yeah.
But they're quite expensive, and I'm the one to run the Voss bottle and and save myself money. So it's hard to get in that mindset. But a lot of the times, I'm getting towards my corals getting a little bit more expensive. So it's kind of like you've got to realize that space is a premium at some point, and you start really considering before you buy a certain piece.
Did I hear you right that you're storing the Voss bottles and you haven't even used your own dosing containers that you've been making yet?
No, I haven't.
Terrible.
I know they work, but
Yeah.
no, I haven't. Because the 2 that I would have used, I'm just using for display. The rest are to sell. So it's something where I've got to prioritize selling before making my system look fancy. This is more about business.
You are making beautiful acrylic products. You should build yourself a fancy dosing container for your own tank.
I definitely will. Look, I have roughly like 12 in the garage and a bunch of ATOs and stuff, but yeah, I don't have one in my tank yet. I do have a nice ATO on this, but the other tanks, I don't even have automatic top-offs on these systems. Now, that's one thing.
Yes. You are going super basic.
That's one thing I would say is almost an essential, just because I know that I'm pretty on the ball with most things, and I do slip. So these systems probably fluctuate between 35 and 37, maybe 38 parts per million. So, but you do what you can. No, look, you keep it as well as you can, and that's why I would always suggest an auto top off. You don't need to have a fancy one. You can just have gravity fed something or other.
One of my buddies built one before. Same thing. Had this like a water bottle upside down, just like a little siphon break thing on the bottom. So just bloop.
Well, the other thing is just
Super
do it
basic.
by hand, but make sure you stay on top of it. Put a little permanent mark on your glass. When you do a fresh water change, you know it's at 100%. Now, obviously, you may increase your salinity a little bit if you're dosing to that tank because you're dosing salts, but over a week or 2, that shouldn't really be much of an issue at all.
Yep. All right, next question. Gabe's doing a $2 super chat. Thanks, Gabe.
Good work, Gabe.
Whoop,
Whoop, whoop.
whoop, whoop. So how about dosing and testing on your quarantine tanks?
Testing is 100%. Like you can't keep a tank without testing. Now, whether that be you want to go an alcatronic or down that path, if you've got the spare money, hell, go do it. You can have them on a few separate systems, can you? You can have them testing separate systems.
Just one, but I suppose you could move the input line.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, either way, you could probably work out. Look, the basic things you have to be testing for, and everyone knows it. Not even going to say it. So they're the basic things. Do we say it? Because I feel bad for the one person that's a new person. Alkalinity.
Yes, 100%.
That's one thing you need to stay on top of. Now, obviously, you want to keep your ratio of alkalinity to calcium and magnesium on par, but I find that alkalinity is something that's a personal preference. You can run it at 7, you can run it at 12. It's what you find success with.
Yep. Cinder, thank you for the $2.99 super chat. With alkalinity, doesn't matter what you keep it at. Keep it stable.
You'll be buying yourself a treat by the end of this stream. Go keep them coming. You can take me out for a beer. I'm in Australia, so it might take a few super chats. I don't think we're allowed out at the moment.
No. One day I'll come to Australia. I'm gonna come visit you one day, okay? When the world is open again. It'd be awesome.
We're going on a tangent, but the Great Barrier Reef is something that if you're a reefer, and if you're comfortable with the ocean, look, even if you're not, but you can swim, you owe it to yourself to go see a decent reef and see how it looks in nature. You will see some things that upsets you. You will see some things that makes you absolutely smile for the next week. Like it's an amazing place. And I find it doesn't matter who you are, as long as you have this tiny little interest in corals, then going out and diving or even snorkeling, it's a whole nother world. You just lose time. You really lose time. And it's my partner, who wasn't even really that stoked about going. She was, but I couldn't get her back on the boat.
Yeah.
This is 7 hours later or something. I'd perforated an eardrum because we were last time I went out, we were snorkeling. I saw a turtle, so I'm like, yeah, I'll just go deeper and deeper. And then I ran out of breath. I'm like, whoop, gotta breathe. And it went pop on the way up. So that was fun.
That's awesome.
Don't do that. Don't do that. That ends badly. But it was still 100% worth it. Anytime you can get on the reef, anytime you can get anywhere with corals, and I hate to say it, but it's one of the reasons why it's one of the wonders of the world. Like it is, in my opinion, one of the greatest reefs in the world. There is plenty of other really nice diving sites. Yeah. But you can drive it's 2,200 kilometers long, which is like 1.4 miles, 1.4 thousand miles, like that you can drive. You can drive for 26 hours and you will get from the bottom to the top of it. That's a reef.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now
it's crazy.
First, K-Town Reefer, he says, "Sup, Devin Rookie," in the super chat. Thank you very much, K-Town.
Another super chat. Geez, they are trying to get me over there. Let's keep going.
So living in Australia, how often do you actually go to the Great Barrier Reef? Like how often would you go dive and check it out?
Not as much as I'd like, that's for sure. It's been a little bit hard lately, obviously, with all the things. I have been trying to organize a trip, but my partner's on her last placement to graduate for her master's for nursing. So we're holding off on that for now. Just waiting. She's literally doing her last stuff over the next kind of 6 to 8 weeks, and then hopefully I can organize something very shortly, because I'd love to get up there while the borders are still shut. Queensland borders are still shut, so not as many tourists. You have a lot more to yourself.
It'd be prime right now. You should.
Oh my God, frothing. Just wanted. Sorry, I can't believe I said that.
We are definitely going to have a beer one day soon. John Michael, $3 super chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John Michael. Appreciate it, buddy.
Yep.
Put a smile on my face. I don't know why. It's someone else's bank account it's going to, but I'm happy because Devin puts a lot of effort into this hobby, and it's showing from his channel. I've been around since I think I knew you before 1,000 subs.
Yeah, man, way back when.
Yeah, way back when. So we've been kicking it for a while now, and his channel is one of the most informative that I find, that has a lot of
Thank you.
reviews and stuff like that that I like.
And I bring them awesome people like you, Rookie, to share your quarantining knowledge.
No, well, this is where I felt really nervous, because I'm just rookie. I'm like this little dude in Australia that's got 3 tanks, just growing a few pieces of coral. And
Mm-hmm.
meanwhile, all of Devon's other guests, so Chris Meckley from ACI Aquaculture, all these big names. Man, by the way, next time you talk to
Mm-hmm.
Chris, tell him he's like my reefing guru. I love that
Okay,
dude.
I will.
He might be an absolute tool in real life, but his camera personality, I absolutely love him to death. Hey, he's
Oh,
one of my favorite
he's a great
reefing.
guy.
He seems like an absolute legend. Hey, and I'd love to meet him one day.
Well, come visit one day when we can actually go to a show, and then we'll go check out his facility. It'd be sweet.
Yes, yeah, no, we'll have to. There's many things on my bucket list. I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't say bucket list, because that kind of means just before I die. In the next kind of year or two, I definitely need to get over there. That's for sure.
Definitely. Let me know whenever.
So let's get back. We went on our tangent for what, half an hour. We'll get
Back
back
to the
to our
topic.
back to quarantine. So the main benefits that I have written down here. So
Mm-hmm.
you can save your display tank. As we mentioned before, you've got to pull it down if emittents get really out of hand to eradicate them. It's basically the only way. You can save your fish from possible issues. That's kind of a given. That's what people quarantine for.
Yep.
It's a good excuse to have another tank. Definitely. It's more room. It realistically, even if your tank is full, you can set up a quarantine and just leave it as a quarantine, and then you got 2 tanks, don't you?
I've done that. Yep.
Win-win. I feel that, and I'm just going off dot points here. Sorry, it sounds so rehearsed or whatever. I feel it makes you a better reefer. The more you can understand about these corals, and that's something that you do when you're observing these corals real closely in quarantine. It's something where you go, well, what's that? That's new.
Yeah.
I got to figure out what that is, and you inform yourself, and that's really important in reefing. The more we can beaten that sticking off this thing, but the more we can learn, the better you'll be.
That's K-Town. If I get coral from Devon, do I need to quarantine them? So
also another big benefit is different environments. So you got different flow and lighting. Say you have an SBS tank, and that's not the best environment for some of your acans or certain corals that are a bit more meaty and whatnot. Then you can put them in there and figure out where it gives you time, doesn't it? It gives you time to frag corals. It gives you time to figure out. It's a bit of a chip in your pocket, I reckon. Bargaining chip for later.
No, true that. And the biggest thing, at least, it's nice to have space to play. That's always been my thing. I've been cramming everything into one little tank for so long. So I'm so stoked to have a big tank so I can actually have room. If I frag, so I'll space it out. I want to do a bunch of videos on fragging in the future and how to frag different corals, which I think will be really cool. But it's just nice to have that space to do stuff. So whether it's another tank or a bigger tank, either way, definitely handy.
It's something that certainly becomes a premium especially when you're just doing your own personal system. I, on the other hand, don't have so much of a problem because I turn over a bit of coral out of my normal tank once everything's quarantined. So it's kind of, I do find space eventually, but it takes time, and you learn that a lot of these corals, you put them too close, you're not going to have much fun.
No.
So
Coral
sometimes
warfare
you're really surprised. It's a thing. It's definitely a thing. I've got so many acans in that tank, and none of them have this issue at the moment. And I haven't encountered the problem in the last 2 years. But I had the exact same colony of acan, right? Cut into frags, blow into each other, and then they were full on attacking each other.
Same
white
colony.
mesomental filaments, the exact same acan. I've had it probably at least 8 times in that tank, but admittedly, I haven't had it with bigger colonies. I've only had it with smaller frags, and I haven't had it recently.
I never would think its own would fight it. A different one, maybe. Wait, are these enchinadas or just micromoose?
No. All Lord Hoensis.
Really?
So not even micromusa. So micromusa is your kind of flatter. They're getting a bit rarer nowadays. Your
Mm-hmm.
micromusa lordhowensis are
Mm-hmm.
your puffier ones, and then your echinatas are, yeah, you know, yeah, I call echinatas enchiladas. They're cool.
Sounds tasty.
But no, all lordhowensis. I've got
Huh.
echinatas,
Those
but
usually
no.
are. I haven't found those to be mean to their own kind, personally.
And so many people haven't. But that's one of these things in this hobby is expect the unexpected. Look, some things could die because, as I heard someone say the other day, because the breeze was blowing the wrong way that morning. these
Yeah.
things, these things can happen, and they will happen. You have to have a bit of a hard exoskeleton in this hobby because
Yeah.
without failure, there's no success.
No, it's true. And you sadly will experience corals fighting. Two, please, in my aquarium show. Thank you guys for the super chats. It's like crazy today. Thank you guys. Rookie, I gotta have you
Good
more often.
work, good work.
Okay, so micro
So
visa
they've covered the $12. Are you got to cover the other 2,000
to get there. Yeah, man, we'll get there
to get me
eventually.
there? All right,
I'll
sweet.
start saving.
Whoop, whoop. I'll see you next week,
Yep.
guys. I'll be live next to Devon. No, you don't want to see me again. We'll keep it. We'll keep it to like what we do this once every 2 years.
Yeah, you'll
We'll
get you
we'll
on again
keep
in a
it
few
to that.
months. We'll get you on in a few months.
I've been putting Devon off so much recently because
What a
I've had
guy.
so much on, and I committed, so it feels good to be here.
It's good to have you, buddy. Okay, reefing with O. I'm cleaning some deaths from acans killing each other in the nano right now. Huh. Crazy. I actually had one of my acans did die from something on my little acan island, so maybe there is some coral warfare going on there.
Look, the exact same opposite I could say at the moment. I've got Acan frags in this tank which are on top of each other and completely different color variants. So obviously could be different, and but same Lord
Yeah.
Hallensis, and they're fine.
Mm. Okay. Two, please, another super chat for hype. So apparently, so my wife uses a Twitch all the time, and she's
Yeah.
like, she's explaining me these hype trains and all these different things. So it just made me think of that.
How do I do this? I can react. Can I react?
I have no
I'll
idea.
react. I'll laugh. There we go. I'm laughing. Ha 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 ha
Nice.
ha. I've never used this cat thing before. It's funny. What is this?
You know, all these
Hang
new
on.
tools.
Oh,
Look at you in an
oh,
office all of a
what's
sudden.
this? Oh, babe, I'm not gonna be home from work. I'm running a little bit late.
As you're ghosting
Don't
into
know
the
what
background.
happened.
Nice.
Oh,
Oh, I
I've
know
never
it.
used Skype. This is weird.
Ecans are all
Well,
about
there we go.
sneak warfare. Oh, there you
Yeah,
go.
so
Reefing with O, 499 towards Rookie's trip to Reefapalooza, New York.
hey, you better put me like a savings account aside. We'll give it about 50 years and I'll have enough, you know?
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah,
No,
we'll be
seriously
sweet.
though, in like a year, if the shows are on, you should come and visit. It'd be a lot of fun.
That's definitely, as I said, something on my bucket list. It's
Yep.
something I've really been wanting to do. I was quite tempted to come over when it was in Vegas because I knew a few
Mm-hmm.
people going over, but I didn't. I didn't. It was just going to cost too much in the end.
Yeah,
Prioritize. Prioritize.
it would be worth it. On Reefer, thank you. You guys are crazy today. Thank you guys very much.
Oh
It's
God, we're
like,
having a super chat war out there or something.
I know.
That's funny. Have you seen what it's Two Please and who else always have super chat wars on Than's? Man, I
Yeah.
love Than. Hey, Than has such good information. His video production would have to be one of the best out there.
His are pristine. He is like as
I don't think
crispy as
he
it
knows it.
gets.
I do love the videos from his new intern,
Mhm.
but I also find myself going back to the videos of him as well. I love seeing him on video. I don't know why. He's just such a
Mm-hmm.
pergola.
Good old pergolas.
Pergola.
I got one of those on my front step.
I got a pergola. I don't have a pergola.
What the heck was I just gonna say? Totally got distracted.
Sorry. We'll do that on our tangents.
It's okay. Oh yeah, with Dan's, if you guys want to learn coral names, his live sales, because they just tell you the name of all the corals as they go by. So it's actually a really good way to learn names of random corals. I'm like, oh, I have that. That's what that's called. So it's
Yeah.
it's really good for that if you guys are just killing time and hanging out.
It's one of them things that I quite often find myself watching his live streams, to fill in time when I'm doing stuff and just in the background, as I do with all your streams.
Yeah.
But it's a good place to figure out exactly the differences in pricing from Australia to America. So it's really interesting to see some things that sell for $20 over here that would be 600 over there, or it genuinely is quite often the opposite. I find
It
a
is
lot of
like
times you have stuff that
it,
we would pay 600 for, it's going for $40 over there.
yeah, and A-cans are like free for you and they're overly priced here. Same thing.
Yeah, and the reason for that is obviously because we can't import. So I shouldn't do that. We can't import stuff, so you don't get any inverts or corals from overseas here, even from Indo.
You can't import, but they
I swear
export.
some boats go a little bit further than others, but
Probably. Just to get those extra ones. Yeah.
that's it. Uh,
Crazy. Okay. So super basic quarantine tank. You could have a hang on the back filter, a light. That's probably it. I mean, a little power head wouldn't hurt, but
That's precisely right. Hang on the back filter it's actually pretty good for mechanical filtration. Now, only because this tank, when I built it, I put a 2-inch brace on it. So I can't actually put a hang on the back filter on it. So I'm finding myself needing to just have an internal filter.
Well,
so
do you even need a filter? I have had.
You
Do you?
definitely need flow.
What?
Well,
You need flow.
saying
But
that, I cleaned that tank there, which has acros and all sorts in it. I cleaned it last night because yesterday I was getting everything clean for the, not that you guys will see anything, but just for my own personal sake, I needed it clean. And I was up till about 1 a.m. doing that, and I forgot to turn the power heads back on.
Oh no.
So I came in the room at like 8:30 this morning, which is what, 7.5 hours later. And I was looking at the tank and I'm like, doesn't look like there's much surface agitation there.
Yeah.
Yep. So both pumps weren't. I would heavily suggest, if you're going to keep acros, you need probably two little sources of flow. So whether it be an internal filter with like some filter media, you can put some carbon in there if need be, and just a little power head or something. So one each end, whatever.
Okay. So speaking of no filter, super basic. This is supposed to be a temporary tank. It's been up for like 4 or 5 months now. But there's a tank sitting by my sun deck door, basically. It was supposed to be there for like temporarily. And my tank took ages and blah, blah, blah. But it literally has a light on it and a Nero for a power head. That's it. There's a few little bio bricks in there randomly and some egg crate and random zoas and corals and stuff. But it's just like the most basic tank ever. No auto top off. Like once a week, I'm like, oh yeah, I should top that off. And like same thing, my salinity gets way too high in it, but it works.
Yep. That's one thing that I actually didn't remember, which I'm glad you touched on then, because I had thought about it to talk about. The more I deal with quarantines, the more. So I used to, when I started the quarantine, I put some live rock from my main display in that tank to bioseed that tank. Obviously, that rock was never going to enter my display tank again. It was always going to be quarantined. If I shut it down, it would go outside.
Yeah.
So the more and more I deal with it, the more I'm realizing the benefits of some of these little bio balls and all this kind of stuff. So they're places that your vermidons, bubble algae, all these sorts of things can't hide in the cracks, because if you've got a little biosphere, you can see exactly the outside. Or if you've got a marine pure block or whatever it be, whatever your flavor for the month is, grab whatever one you want, do your research, figure out which one you want to ideally use. But in a little quarantine, I'd highly suggest the little spheres, little bio balls, whatever they're called.
2 or 3 of those and you're good.
Personally, I use MaxSpect. They seem to work pretty good. And yeah, I've had success with that, basically enough to be able to pull the rock out of the system. And that, when you don't have, let's face it, the rock's there for you and the fish. If you've already got the bacteria, if you've already got the space for all that, the rock's not there for much else. So I find in a quarantine, it can be super, super hard to deal with.
I like, The only rock that's literally in mine is I have my like big rock full of like those citrus rhodactis, and I got like another little rocky pedestal with a bunch of chalices on it. Mind blank. Like those are probably gonna move in, but other than that, it's basically like frag racks and stuff in there. But it's just because they're already full of coral.
Yes. So now we've talked about all the benefits of having a quarantine tank.
Mm-hmm.
I want to play devil's advocate
All
and
right.
say some cons. So there is definitely many, many, many cons to running a quarantine system. This is something where you've all set up a tank before, I'd assume, or most of you, or you're intending to, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to encounter the uglies. You're going to go through all these stages in a tank, and it's the exact same for a quarantine system. You're not gonna beat that unless you seed it with a lot of bacteria. And look, I have not successfully done that so far. I've tried, but I've always had some point of diatoms or just the uglies for a little bit. So as I said
Thanks
before,
for the reminder.
the longer you can have a system up for, or just add beneficial bacteria once every couple of days, or your continuum gen M, any of these bacteria that you just gradually ate. That what are they called? They eat the stuff. Yeah. Anyway,
Denitrifying bacteria, or those like waste away type of dealios.
Yeah, no, I was looking for a more technical word than that, but I'll stay away from it.
Heterotrophic. Yeah, I don't remember which word it is. There's too many. They all blur
Yes.
together.
So the cons, one of the first cons, and this obviously has to be factored in, is it's more of everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's more salt, it's more power, it's more room, it's genuinely
Time.
just more. It's more time, it's more cleaning, it's more. It is something that can take it out of you. And if you're not staying on top of a display tank, then you're not going to be able to stay on top of a display and a quarantine. So that is something to factor in before you go down this path. As I said before, you're either in this for the long run, like Devin and I, perhaps, or you're just starting in this hobby. If you're not kind of committed to keeping corals alive, you should go deal with cars or go find another hobby, because at the end of the day, that's what our end success goal needs to be. So as I said, just learn.
Yeah, it's true. Joshy Jock. I'm an Aussie. I acclimate them in their bags, slowly add water, then dump them in. Screw quarantine. Okay. You can get away for years until something happens. It was like 5 or 6 years I was all good, and then one day hit freaking acrid flatworms, and it was a nightmare to get rid of them in my lagoon tank. That sucked. But yeah, I was fine for years, but one day I wasn't. So
And it's the exact same with fish. So many people
yeah.
don't quarantine it and everyone's perfectly fine. But you have to be comfortable with that system may have certain parasites in it. Like, they may not be visible, but you've got to have that in the back of your mind.
No, exactly. Yeah, what's D from Brooklyn? Honestly, most of us don't have space for a quarantine system, and that's true. Most people don't. I would at least dip everything though, at the very least, like except for smooth skins. But
So
everything
now you
else.
look at that quarantine system's only 86 liters or something. It has a footprint of about 40 centimeters by about 25 or something. If you don't have that much space, then I'd question where you're like sitting watching this stream from, because I'm pretty sure that most people have a bench space there or something. You look at this quarantine system here, it's set up on 2 cabinets. Like, you don't necessarily have to have the space, you just need to make the space.
Fair point. I'm gonna assume that
Serious.
most people that don't have the space, it's more of a spousal restriction.
Yeah. And look, that's completely understandable.
Yep.
But that's where bad things in your main display can be a beneficial thing, because if they care whatsoever about your hobby that you're interested in, you can explain to them, look, the only way that I can keep these things out of my tank is have another system. I know it's not ideal, but it is genuinely one of the best and most successful ways of keeping crap out of my tank.
I like that dedication. Diacanthus reef. I had a quarantine tank on top of the refrigerator. You have space. That is some solid
Exactly,
dedication right there.
exactly. Although I'd hate to be cooling that thing in summer.
Yeah.
Australia's already like 38 degrees, and you've got a fridge pouring all its heat on my tank. No thanks.
You know, when a minute ago when you're like, where are you watching the stream from? Fort Wolf's like, I'm watching it in my car. There's no room in here.
Yeah, well, I'll vouch with you on that one. Actually,
Yeah.
there probably is, but you wouldn't want to put water in a tank. You
No.
fit a tank, just no water in it. All right.
Yeah.
So
Every
you
time
can
you hit the
only
brakes.
you can quarantine lizards. There we go.
Perfect. Um, yeah, so I know not everyone's going to do it, and it does take space. But if you do have the space, you will save yourself a big headache kind of long term. Because you can get away with things for years and years, but eventually something's going to sneak in and just wreak havoc in your tank. So at the
And
very least, dippy dip.
And hey, as we said at the start of this stream, and I think I've said a few times successfully, it's not something that's going to be for everyone whatsoever, but it is something where at least if you have the option in the back of your brain, you
Mm-hmm.
know that there is an option to keep verminids out of my tank. There is
Mm-hmm.
an option to keep bubble algae.
You're
It's going
making
to cost a little bit more and take a little bit more time, but in the long run, if I'm trying to set up a look, tanks only used to be kind of 4, 5, 6 years old and they die from old tank syndrome. I
mm-hmm.
believe we're in the day and age where we've got the technology and the know-how to keep a tank running for successfully. And obviously people have done it in the past, but I'm talking on a generic basis from everyone type of thing as a percentage wise.
Mm-hmm.
You can have I believe you could have a 20-year reef. And
Yep.
why not? Unless
Mm-hmm.
you're upgrading. So if an upgrade's not in your future, you'd want to highly consider quarantining everything that goes in that tank.
Yep. Okay, that's actually a good question. So, Gabe Reef Tampa, do you think old tank water is beneficial or shouldn't happen when you're doing a quarantine?
No,
So,
you go, you go.
okay, for just a straight up quarantine where your coral is coming from an unknown source, no, I wouldn't really worry about it. If you're upgrading or moving your tank, I think there's benefit to mixing the water between the new tank and the old tank to level all your parameters. But just for quarantine from somewhere random, then I don't think it overly matters for that one.
Well, ideally, you have a salt that mixes up around your parameters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the general where we want to try to be. So if that's not as much of a factor,
Mm-hmm.
I would. And look, I'm. This is just my opinion. There's not that much bacteria living in the water. Bacteria is a surface thing. There's obviously a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that much of a benefit. We're getting this water out of our tank in general because it smells like crap.
Yeah,
It's dirty. I wouldn't be putting that in another system, and I never have.
that's fair. Yeah, no good points.
Water's so cheap. Like it's not when you look at it in this hobby,
Mm-hmm.
water's one of the cheapest things you can do, a water change
Yeah,
to make things better. So you do a water change to make things better. I wouldn't be starting with your crap unless you literally have an amazingly clean tank that's beautiful and you just want to do a water change. Yeah, whatever, toss some water in there. But it's
mm-hmm.
not something that I'd do.
Yeah,
My
no, fair
water's
enough.
like dirty. If I've used
Yeah,
it, I've used it. It's used. It's in the name.
yeah.
It
Two,
gets thrown away.
two, please. Congrats, Gabe's Reef Tampa. There you go. Congrats, Gabe. Thanks, two, please. UV.
Congrats, Gabe. What are we congrating on?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't
They're
know
going
either.
on off
But he gets
on
the
their own
congrats.
little.
Whoop whoop.
Well, that's beautiful.
Yep.
So in general, quarantining can be a very overwhelming thing, and that's something you have to consider too when you start. As we
Mhm.
said, if you're not staying on top of one tank, you're not going to be able to stay on top of two. But
Fair points.
there's plenty to be learned in the process.
So true. Okay. Someone's asked about UV sterilizers. Anyone use one? Have you ever used UV?
Yeah, I run UV in that quarantine system at the moment. Only a small one. Um, yeah, UV I find great. You don't want to kill everything, and that's one of the problems with UV. It kills everything. Well, everything
True.
that goes through the UV and gets affected by the light. But it's I find it more beneficial than a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you're having a bacteria bloom, you put that UV in and overnight you'll clear it up.
I got one that's currently on my lagoon tank because I had dino in there and I wanted to let it eradicate it before I moved any coral over to the new tank. So I've
How
never,
you finding it?
it worked. It's like 98% gone, just like the odd little bits in there, but it's mainly gone. So it's worked well. So I'm going to try running it on the big tank next. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, UV doesn't discriminate. It kills whatever goes through it. So, or it doesn't necessarily kill it. It just sterilizes it so it doesn't repopulate. So essentially killing
Now,
it off.
ozone is another thing that you could be adding to a quarantine system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, to do so, you'd be likely to have a sump, so you have a skimmer or a means to put that into the water. But
Yeah.
as I
Um,
said before, you can have a quarantine system that's as good as your normal tank if you really want.
mhm. What's better, UV or ozone? They're similar but different.
UV's easier
It is easier.
and
However,
can cost a lot less.
no, they will both give you water clarity. Okay, they'll both give you crystal clear water. UV has the benefits of it will help kill certain algae if it's the right flow rate, or potential parasites again if it's the proper flow rate. Ozone kind of works a bit like a carbon, where it will carbon will suck out those organics, those yellowing pigments in your water. That's kind of how it gives you the clear water, but it will also, like, I find it also if there's any scents or like fishy smells, it helps get rid of that. So I don't think you get that with UV, but you would with ozone because it breaks down the organics more. So a couple different ways. I might actually do a video on ozone again, an updated one, because I've had a lot of questions on that lately. So maybe we'll do that for next week.
And that's a problem, I guess. It depends on where you are in the world. You guys are quite lucky being in America, being able to get the abundance of equipment that you do have available to you. You look in Australia and there's in Australia and
Yeah,
there's so many less options. It's not funny. So
but you have this thing called the internet.
you do, but it's just kind of gray imports,
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
that's fair.
it's hard to deal with. It's I don't know. It's more
Mm-hmm.
so I haven't personally put ozone on my tank because I used to deal with ozone a fair bit for one of my old work. I used to do fire and water restoration when I was quite younger,
Yeah.
and we used to ozonize a lot of stuff. And yeah, I just don't like the smell.
Yeah. Okay. So, one, you don't want to run too much of it. And two, I run it at like 2 in the morning to like 5 in the morning when I'm sleeping and not around, anyways. But yeah, if you have too much, you'll get like a staticky smell, or like a lightning smell. One thing that you can do is like you can put carbon if you're using your skimmer as your reactor. You put carbon on top of it, then it'll absorb that kind of scent. So a few different ways to do it. I don't
Well,
know.
there's many means to get around it, but I think ozone generator, even the small ones are over here, are a few $100, and then
Dude,
you've got to, as I
mine's
said,
like a
make.
$50 China one, like super cheap.
I suppose I haven't looked into it recently.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. But as I said, like then you've got to. What's the other means of getting it in apart from the skimmer? I've
Ah,
never looked into putting ozone into my tank too much.
yeah, so they do make ozone reactors as long as your skimmer is rated for ozone, so it's ozone safe. Then you can use your skimmer as the reactor. D from Brooklyn, does ozone unit release into the room? So generally, it's just an input and an output, and most of them don't have a pump on it, so you got to either push or suck air through it. I have mine hooked up so that it's being sucked into my skimmer and it mixes just my bubble chamber inside of it. But yeah, that works. There's lots of other things you can do, like add an air dryer to it, which makes it more efficient. Now, I've always run such a low amount, like, because too much ozone's bad. It could be trouble, right? So you only want to use just a little bit. So I've never bothered with the dryer because I'm like, I don't care if it's less efficient because I'm only running a little bit anyways. So different ways to look at it.
There's that other problem, but you've got to
Yeah.
factor these things in. Like UV, you can stick in the water and it's going to clarify it. An ozone generator, or like you need to have like read your redox. Then you need to like, do you not? Is that not?
Yeah, you don't.
That's what I've always.
Yeah, so
To make sure you're staying in safe levels, that's the easiest way to monitor it, is it not?
it is. So
Like get your
redox,
ORP.
yeah, redox or ORP is
Yeah.
basically the oxygen reduction potential of the water.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, so 450 is generally the highest you want it to be. So mine generally is kind of like 380 to 450 in that range with the ozone. Like I have it, if it ever hits 450, turn off my ozone, but
Yeah, see,
it bounces around.
that's the problem. It's all good when you've got an apex or whatever, but if you don't have a way of monitoring that
Well,
ORP, it can be a little bit more difficult.
then you run just a tiny smidge of it for like an hour a day. Just keep it low. Now, I'm really curious to see what happens because I know UV can also raise your ORP, right? So if I put UV on a tank 24/7, then I have the ozone. I'm like, what am I gonna do?
I wouldn't have a way of monitoring it, so I don't know.
Well, I'll let
But
you know in a
very
few weeks
possibly,
because
very
I'm gonna
possibly.
find out. Yep. Like buying corals, this whole hobby is a rabbit hole. Yes, yes, it is. Okay, so if I was gonna do, okay, super budget quarantine tank, 20-gallon long tank, throw on a power head or like an aqua clear or something and light, done. Super cheap. You could probably do it. Your light's obviously your most expensive part. The rest of it wouldn't be bad at all. If I was to do it at some point in the future, I would probably do like a little all-in-one aquarium. So you can, if you want to run any carbon or any other jazz, it could be all in the back. It's all contained. It has a return pump, which is probably enough flow for some stuff. If you're doing a bunch of acros, maybe still need one to add a power head. But I would probably just find a used all-in-one, like a Innovative Marine Lagoon 25 would be a nice footprint because that's like 2 foot by 2 foot, be a decent size. But I would probably try and find a used one of those because it's nice and simple. It's all in one tank. You don't have to worry about all the extra stuff and do something along those lines.
I echo that exact thought. An all-in-one tank is one of the most basic things you can get, which it has the benefit of being able to just add everything in the back. So one of the easiest routes. They don't come up to, as I said, this is all kind of location based.
Mm-hmm.
They don't come up too often in Australia, but you can find them definitely secondhand.
Yep.
You buy one new if you want. They're not that expensive.
Mm-hmm. Aqua Clear or Tidal? I'm debating between the two. I've never heard of Tidal.
No, I personally haven't either.
I generally go for Aqua Clear just because I've used a bazillion of them over the years and they just work, little workhorses. Yeah, so Port Wolf, you're saying, do you know you can create ozone with UV? You definitely can. They do have ozone generators that just have a UV bulb in it. The only problem is, for me, then they're taking like 30, 40 watts of power versus like 1 watt for the other one. And then you got to replace the bulbs once in a while. Where that little corona discharge place, you just like wipe it off like once a year and you're probably good. So.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right.
I don't know. So there you go, guys. What do you think? Think you're
Just before we go, actually,
what do you
I have
got?
a few
What do you got for
questions
me?
for you.
Ask away. I got a few answers for you.
All right, let's see. Let's start this with the hard-hitting one. Do you ever think you'll quit?
Probably not. I think I'm addicted for life. There'd be like a void in my life, like literally, like between messing with the tank and like playing with corals or making videos about tanks and doing this. It's like I spend like 90% of, I don't know, most of my free time is spent tank related. Like there'd be this giant void in my life if I didn't have a tank. I don't know what I'd do with myself anymore.
No, I'm 100% with you. I was down at the fish shop the other day, and I'm there in my believe it or not, I have fish underwear and fish pants. It was just the day I happened to be wearing my fish pants, and I was talking to the guy that I just saw, Brendan for Refurbished, and I was like, man, I used to be really, really into cars, like really into cars. I used to do cars for 10 years. I still have some imports lying around and whatnot, but I would never get cars on my pants. Never. I would never be seen in pants with cars. And yet here I am bragging about my pants with fish. So it's something where you definitely get entwined in the hobby, and
there's actually fish on your pants right now.
No, not on these pants.
Okay.
Oh, damn it. I didn't wear them. I was trying to look too professional.
I have one pair of boxers that's all like coral reefy.
No, that's good. My missus, every time we go to the shop, she's always like, do you want these? She's good value actually. She quite often buys me corals and stuff. So that's one thing. If you can get your
Nice.
partner on board with these things,
Yeah.
it's going to make your journey a lot easier. Maybe go let her buy a pair of shoes or whatever. You just get to get a pair of coral.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good.
Yep.
So your favorite dive spot that you have been to so
That
far?
I have been to. There's been different ones for different reasons. The two coolest ones that I've probably done.
Yeah, coolest. We'll go for that.
So last fall I volunteered doing some coral restoration stuff in the Cayman Islands, which was pretty amazing because it was like helping like put up coral trees, and we went out diving at nighttime for the coral spawning, which was amazing. So it was like literally like 2 or 3 night dives. We're out there all of a sudden. One day it started happening, and you're just like you're in a snow globe. It's just like little gammy, little tiny coral eggs everywhere. It was super cool to see. That was pretty amazing. And then like even night diving was crazy because like there's those little bioluminescence in the water, and I'm like turn off my flashlight, I'm just like wave my hands around. You see all these little sparkles of like indigo color everywhere. So I don't know, that was really cool. Caymans was beautiful. That was amazing. And the one other one that sticks out in my mind is in the Galapagos Islands. They
Wow.
have yeah, that's really cool there. Whereas it wasn't as much for like big reefs and everything else, but I remember this one area we're diving down. It was a fairly strong current, so we're doing this like kind of a current dive. I'm like hanging onto this rock, and we went over into this little valley, and there was like 50 sharks just chilling there, just like in the current, and yeah, that was pretty crazy.
That's why I get freaked out a little bit about sharks, but that's what
Yep,
you don't understand. You see, you get scared of all these things, but then you get out there and
they're
you're just
they're
so
fine.
mesmerized at looking at these tiny little polyps on this
Yeah.
coral or something. You're not paying attention to what's behind you.
Mm-hmm.
I remember last time that I was out, I was swimming really far out, trying to get away from all the people because you normally go out with a few people or whatever. And I was way out the back, and I turned around. I'm looking at all this coral. I turn around, and there's this. He would have been 6 foot. Maori wrasse.
Ooh,
This
cool.
big Maori
Yeah.
wrasse. They are so beautiful. Like one of the. If that would be my ideal pet. If I could ever keep one of them, I wouldn't, but because I wouldn't do it to it. They
Yeah,
belong in the ocean.
they're too big.
But they're so beautiful, the fish, and
Mm.
you can't help yourself, but just for a second, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm out here by myself. Jesus. So
Mm-hmm.
it happens to the best of us, but it's easy enough to get past. That's for sure.
It's so true. In the Caymans, one thing I thought was super cool is like I found wild sexy shrimp in a little anemone. It was super cool. Like just like these little creatures, it's just so cool to see them. You know, stuff's in your tank. Actually, go see it, and you know what things are. You're like, oh, I know this fish. Oh, I have that one. Like I think that part's amazing.
That's what you'd think. You'd be going out to the reefs to look at it as a whole, and by
Mm-hmm.
all means, that's where you start. You start at
Mm-hmm.
the top of the water, and you can see it as a whole. But the real intrigue is going in closely and just having a good look at all these. It's just
Yeah.
it's not a whole nother world.
And then
So
Christmas
you're
tree worms. Those were really cool.
Yeah, no, the multicolored Christmas tree. We
Yeah.
don't get them as much over here. Being that on the Great Barrier where I've been diving anyway, but they definitely do get them up north.
Yeah. Um, the other random thing that always makes me happy is those little like sand eels,
Yeah, yeah. No, they
whatever they're
just stick
called.
out. They're like,
Yeah, and
just stick out in the
then you come
sand.
close,
Yeah,
like boop, they're gone. I don't know why those things just make me happy. They
yeah.
just make me smile every time. So I'd
I
like go
haven't
down there and I'd
personally,
hover and just wait for them to come back up.
I haven't personally witnessed them, but yeah, I've
Garden
definitely
eels, thank
seen
you.
them on video.
Yeah.
They look awesome.
Oh, dude, they're great. I've seen them in a few different dive places now. Love those guys.
So your most missed coral.
My
What's the
most
coral
missed.
that bit the dust that you most miss? We're getting deep here.
They're hard.
Real
Um,
deep, real deep.
what did die? Well, almost died. Coming back, thankfully.
Okay, so successfully healed. That
Yeah.
doesn't count. That doesn't count.
No, it was like a nice big chunk, and now I have this little nub that's coming back that survived. Does that count?
Not really. What's a
Oh,
piece that you've lost that you wish you never lost?
I don't like losing any coral. They all make me sad.
Hey, we don't like it, but
They're
it
my
happened.
children.
Go back 3 or 4 years ago. What's a piece you lost that you wish you still had?
I don't know.
Geez, I'm making you think now, aren't I?
These are
Surely
deep
you've lost enough
questions.
corals on the day. Well, Have you ever lost a fish that you would?
Yes,
What's a fish you regret losing?
my powder blue
Because
tank.
fish, let's just face it. I don't know about over here, over there, but fish. I started in the hobby. My yellow eye cold tang was $90.
Hmm.
6 months later, I accidentally killed it,
Yeah.
and I had to get another one. It was already 120. They're now 300 to buy for the shops, I think. So they're like going to be 400 retail here. So fish prices are stupid at the moment.
Okay. More recently is freaking Zoa I bought. That was the most expensive freaking Zoa of my life. I got a wicked deal on it, but it was still stupid expensive. And it
Yeah.
melted away on me. I was just like, "Rah!"
There we go. That's what we're looking for. I've had plenty of them before. You're like, hang on, there was a coral on that plug yesterday. There
Yeah.
now no longer is. Where'd it go?
It was speckled crack Zoas, which they're like stupid expensive. And I got like 3 polyps for what they normally sell one for. So I'm like, sweet, this will be wicked to grow out. And then they all melted. And it just pained me because it was still like just so overly priced.
You can get the speckled cracks over here. I think last one I saw was about 600 per polyp.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I spent
Round
much less than that for 2 or 3 polyps. But it was just like stupid, and they all melted, and I was mad and sad, and it was no good.
And your fish, did you end up replacing it, or you have never
No, not
gone?
that one.
No, what was it?
Oh, my powder blue.
Powder blue. Ah, yeah, powder blue can be one of them ones. I've never tried them personally.
Amazing fish, super cool fish, and he was in a temporary tank again for the tank move, and I knew a guy was importing some fish, so I'm like, oh sweet, I grabbed a couple things, and of course one of them had something, and that's when I learned my lesson and started to actually quarantine fish.
Unfortunately, they're one of the ones that are quite susceptible to it,
Yep.
aren't they? Yes. Oh well, if you could do anything differently,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do?
Probably
Would you
nothing.
come on, you would have just gone straight to this big display that you've got nowadays, wouldn't you?
So, talking back to myself, I would have said just buy like good equipment from the beginning instead of upgrading like 20 times. But then again, I know that wouldn't have happened. You're like, oh yeah, go spend $1,000 on lights. When I'm like, my $200 China light, and then I upgrade to like the $400 China light, and then I get like a half brand, and then I finally get good lights. So I've done that, upgraded many times. Like I always end up getting like the fancier stuff eventually, but I'll usually start with the super cheap stuff and then upgrade it like 5 times, where it might have been cheaper to buy like that in the first place. But when you start a new hobby, you start something new, you can't just spend that much money. It's so hard to
No,
justify it.
no.
And
Yeah.
reefing is just one of those overly priced hobbies. But it's an amazing hobby, but yeah.
No, 100%. You're right. That's like, I remember before, one of the things that first got me kind of interested in marine fish. I remember going to a doctor's when I was much younger,
Mhm.
and they had this amazing marine tank that had these beautiful fish. I used to sit there for hours watching
Yeah.
these things. And it's funny how little it can take to get you interested in something. Hey, here I
Mhm.
find myself 20 years later just interested in the exact same thing, or probably longer. It's more than 20 years. Yeah.
Well, so when I was younger, I had some fish tanks and whatever. And then my wife now, when before she had this little like 6 gallon fluval edge tank that was sitting there, thinking, oh, that's a cool tank. But I took that, and that's what started this whole rabbit hole now, because it was like, here's that little tank, and then like a month later turned to a planted tank, and then I was like crazy into planted tanks for a few years, and I was breeding like the little fancy like crystal shrimps and like blue tigers, orange eye, like all these crazy little tiny shrimps. I was really big into those for a while in planted tanks, and then I started saltwater, and then I was just fully converted. Oh, here we are.
So on that note, your partner is she's pretty down with the hobby?
Eh,
Yeah.
eh.
Okay, she doesn't like how much you spend on the hobby, obviously.
Yeah, that's not even that bad. Yeah, everyone has their thing. I think I just talk about it too much.
It's
Is
hard because
what
it
it
takes up a
is.
lot of time.
Yeah, that part's okay. I think she's tired of hearing fish stuff 24/7.
Okay, so more so she just wants to get rid of you more. She's like, buy more tanks, so I have to spend less time with you.
No, just different
Don't have to hear
topics.
your fish crap.
She's like, oh, your stories are fish related. I'm like, that's what I do.
Yep. It's hard to sometimes you find yourself in a fish shop, LFS or whatever, having a conversation. It's always about fish.
I know I don't know. It's an
I try
obsession.
not to out of these kind of scenarios, but definitely when I'm in a place that has blue lights, I'm talking about fish.
Yep, pretty much.
Tell me something you never thought you'd admit on YouTube.
I don't know.
Come on. We're going deep for the however many, the 20 people that are still watching.
89. Where's
Wow.
your answers to all these questions? It goes both ways.
No, you need to interview me. See, that's where you come on my channel and you can hit the. I'll
I don't get
allow
to do that
you to
now
hit the.
while we're
No,
on.
no.
What
Hey,
is this?
hey, how's this guy? It's like seriously, this guy, this fella, he calls me on Monday. He's like live stream. I'm like, yeah, I'll finally commit. And then he's like, do you want to get me a picture of your quarantine tank? I'm like, gee, I got to do all the work for this stream. You may as well just put me on the stream and you can just go for the day and I'll just do your stream for you.
Perfect. All right,
Make
see you
me
later,
do all
guys.
the effort. You're obviously feeling a little bit better from your food poisoning.
Oh, last night was a disaster. I'm still like feel super flushed, but it's way better than I was earlier.
That's good, man. That's good.
Yeah, last night was not a good night.
So we're not going to touch on that question, hey? We can move on.
Well, we probably just answered it. Yep.
All right. So what's your favorite reefing memory to do with tanks?
Favorite reefing memory?
Could be tanks, could be. I suppose you went over your favorite diving spots before, but
yeah, honestly, I really I like the community a lot.
I was going to say it could be a show, it could be something like that. I know a lot of that. That's
yeah, like obviously not so much this year, but the last like 2 years, just going to all the shows. Like I have a lot of fun meeting people and just like hanging out, and because you can completely geek out with everyone just as obsessed as you are, right? So I have a lot of fun at the shows. So I do miss them a bit.
Yeah, we didn't get the frag stock this year. It was meant to be about a month ago, and that was a bit sad. I made a video months and months and months and months ago saying like, hopefully we'll get a chance to do it, and yeah, no. Bloody,
this is
we're not going to go there. We're not going to do the typical thing and talk about the crap that's been going on for the last 8 months. We'll just move on from there.
Yep. Okay, this is a great comment I just want to read from Mike. I'm constantly asking myself why I'll spend hundreds on a coral, but always baby stepping when it comes to spending half as much on equipment. Trying to realize is just vital and important. It's true. It's funny.
I'm
true.
exactly the same as you. And as I said, this is just in between you and I. Please don't take this as a brag or anything like that. But there's probably a good 4.5 grand's worth of coral just in that one little tank there.
I believe it, man.
The equipment to run it is probably worth about $100. so I'm with you there. But look, the more basic you can do it, the more you learn, the harder it is on yourself, obviously. But it's going to make yourself a better reefer at the end of the day. You're going to understand all the processes behind all these things instead of just sticking something on that does it itself. So that's
true.
Especially when you're starting, it's good to know exactly what you're using something for, why you're doing that. It's all well and good to do something, but why you doing that?
Yeah, no, 100%, especially when you're first starting out. But down the road, I'm not going to lie, I freaking love having an automated elk tester. It's so nice not to have to like test that all the time.
That's one thing. As I said, as long as you understand the process behind it, by all means do it, because it makes it easier. It gives you more time, and it makes everything more streamlined. So I'm jealous. As I was on that stream, I got to top 3 on your alkalinity giveaway, on your dose giveaway. I was in top 3, man. I'm sitting there so nervous, just sitting there like, come on. And then the guy that won, sorry if that got real loud. The guy that won it's like, oh, I don't even want it anyway. So I'm like, give it to me, give it to me.
I was totally rooting for you there.
Oh no! Oh,
I know that guy.
I was in the top. I actually made it to the top 20. I was like, "Whoa!" And then I made it to the top 10, and I was like, "Wow!" Oh, it's insane, dude. That was a roller coaster that day.
Oh yeah, it was good. It was fun though.
I was so excited. My frag tanks were about to thank you so much.
All right, I'll work on another giveaway soon. It was fun. I like doing them. I love doing those. They're so much fun.
Man, that's it. It's hard to, at the end of the day, $1,000 piece of equipment. It's a hard pill to swallow.
It really is.
It doesn't matter who you are. So I'm with you on that, man. But the more you can,
this hobby's can be expensive when you first start out. The one nice thing laid down the road, like even now, like a lot of the time, like I have a decent stash of coral now. So like I have a really hard time spending like a fortune on a chunk of coral, but I'll happily trade for it. So it's a nice thing. So once you build up that collection of coral that's pest free from your quarantine system, then you at least you can like trade and barter with people and you get other really cool corals, right? Like I'm not gonna go spend $300 on that little dinky frag, but I'll trade you some other frag for it, right? So it's a good way to
Precisely.
go.
And at the end of the day, like it's easy enough if you know what you're doing, you got your
Mm-hmm.
parameters right. Um, Several of the expensive pieces in that tank, for instance, you guys would laugh at because they're $400 mushrooms, because some of the mushrooms are really quite hard to get over here, the nicer ones. You may
Yeah.
not laugh at them because they're really nice, but they'd probably be less over in America because you have access to some pretty good stuff. But you cut the foot a couple of times, if you're comfortable with that, however you're going to go about it, you're going to make some money eventually. You've just got to
Yeah.
be patient. 6 months down the track, you'll be. I've got my mushrooms there that have been there for 2 months. They've all got probably 5 little babies on the frag plugs
Oh,
that are
nice.
growing out.
So did you like nick the foot or did you cut a little pizza slice out of them? Like, would you, or does it just
I,
naturally make babies?
with the expensive ones, I did not have the kahunas
Yeah.
to cut it in half.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just taken foot cuts. But pretty much, as long as you get the foot cut done properly and kind of scrape it a little bit in the middle so it is separated,
Yep.
quite often they'll fuse back together.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds weird, but it literally will just melt in and just become the same piece again.
Yep.
So as long as you've got it kind of a little gap in between, that one piece will walk off. And just make sure you got frag areas for it to walk off, so it's not walking off onto a rack or whatever. But
I've my one fancy mushroom, like that little jawbreaker one that I got at Reef, New York, and it's like the brightest freaking orange. I've like literally like down the hallway. I walk in and I'm like see this like from this frag tank. I'm like, I must have it. And they told me the price. I'm like, nope. I'm like, how much for the little baby? But anyways,
how much was it?
1,500.
1,500.
Well, that's what he wanted for the big one with some babies. I'm like, how much for just that little baby on the side? So I just bought a little baby. So it was much more affordable.
Babies grow, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Like and mushrooms don't take all that long to grow, I find. As long as it's not, some mushrooms are tiny and they're destined to be tiny their whole life. Yeah. Other mushrooms, as long as the mother's big enough, they will grow pretty quickly. 5-6 months, you'll have one almost the same size most of the time.
Yep. But yeah, so I don't know. I haven't been brave enough, same thing, to try fragging or do anything with it. But it's beautiful.
I got offered one the other day for $650 and I turned it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little while. $300.
Almost tempted. No, my LFS told me they could get one for cheaper. He's like, I can get you one with purple and green in it as well for cheaper. I'm like, maybe. It's not a real jawbreaker, but then is it?
It's all about just the bright, crazy colors. For me, at least.
So
like,
is there any new purchases in your future? Any big purchases that you need to make?
I don't think so.
You're pretty set up. You've got that frag tank all sorted.
Yeah, well, I'm basically just reusing all my old gear for it, so made it easy. I've been hoarding all my stuff.
That purple piping's making me feel a certain type of way in my pants, man. I like that. Yeah, I really like it.
It turned out pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
I was literally trying to think. I'm like, okay, I've done red and white. I've done blue and gray. I'm like, that's what most people do. So this time, I'm like,
orange, gray, red.
Yeah, so I'm like, what's not common?
Before.
What don't you see? And I was like, ooh, purple might be cool. So I found a couple photos. And I was like it.
I'm going to do my next one Barbie themed. I'll just make it pinks to be different.
Do it. I'm curious if you're going to find pink pike.
Hell no. I couldn't look at that and feel good about myself. I stick to, it's like most of my shirts and stuff like that. I'm always like black or white. I have a few colored things, but it's kind of like you stick to the basics, don't you?
That's fair. I do think the purple and gray does look pretty sweet, though. I'm happy with that one.
It turned out admittedly very well.
I was wondering how many comments I get about that, but yeah, no, I thought it turned out pretty cool. Purple and what? Green and what? Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think I need anything. Like I've got it all. Like I bought it. I tried to get an RODI. Like I literally tried for like weeks to find a way to link my auto water change station to this tank, but I could not find a way to get the wires there nicely. So I bought my buddy's old RODI system, so I just have one sitting right beside the tank, so it has its own RODI. And I think I'm gonna get one of those little like RODI controllers, just let it auto turn on and refill the bin whenever it's empty.
Yeah, I don't know about them.
Yeah.
I suppose it's not into your tank. That's the main thing.
I
Some
was
people
gonna
set
go
it up that
direct,
way
but
into
then I
the
just
tank. Oof.
I
That's just
was.
a direct source to the faucet. I don't like that at all.
But now there's a 10-gallon ATO in the middle. But
Yeah, yeah. At
the,
least
the other slight drivers, I'm gonna try doing a calc reactor. So then I wanted to have a source for the calcary water. Or if I put the reef bot on there, then it has its RODI source, right? So I kind of needed a bit of a reservoir anyway. So now it kind of works as a doubles as that little buffer in the middle.
Hey, by all means, some people, plenty of people have probably ran them successfully. I just like straight into the tank. I just
Scares you?
anything that you can make a bit of a redundancy, which that has zero behind, unless you've got two of them, is yeah, it's not in my cards for the future.
Well, you're manually topping off your tank, so you're extra safe, unless you just
Exactly,
like dump
yeah.
in too much.
No water's getting in there unless I know about it. that's for free, sure. And it probably doesn't happen as often as it should. It's like, oh, whoops, I didn't do that yesterday. I'll put 4 liters in today.
Oh, so it's funny, eh?
Yeah. Hey, corals are
true.
resilient as long as you have, as I said before, people always look for an excuse for things to die. You know the basics. You kind of keep the basic things on in parameters. You're gonna be successful.
Now, one of the other things we were talking about earlier too is with corals or STN or RTN, what causes it? And usually it's not something you just did, but it may be something happened 3 weeks ago and it's kind of like fallout from some stress response. So it is really hard to actually know what causes it, but generally it's some kind of like a swing or instability or something that happened.
And as so many people have noted before, I believe I've even heard it on one of your streams. Every time something seems to happen, people react, and they normally react with more than one thing.
Yep.
So a lot of the times, if you're starting a new dosing range or something, you'll start something else at the same time because you're going to be bothered doing it every day. So you're like, I'll do this as well, and I'll do this as well. It definitely pays to be patient in this hobby and kind of try, if you have the time and ability, to just do one thing at a time and see what that does 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month down the track, because it does take some time for everything to show.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting, like in Australia, same thing, like how some corals are cheap there but expensive here and vice versa. But even between like Canada and the States, I find the same thing. Like I remember I was at a show and there's like, was it like Dragon Soul Torch? It was like $600 US. I'm like, oh, they're like $200 in Canada. They're way cheaper here. Like it's just
well, let's
crazy.
just face it, it's further, isn't it? So the East Coast would be more expensive for coral and fish.
No, it's actually, but that's like one of the main hubs, right? So like you have in the States, there's California or LA, not LA, Florida. Like those are like where the main ports like come in for stuff being imported. Like that's where the majority of it is. So like certain things, but like what are they called? Like Recordias, like or rock flowers. They're dirt cheap in Florida compared to there here or a lot of other places, but because the Keys is right there, and they probably just collect them there. But it's crazy the difference in different places.
It's silly how a little line on a piece of paper can make that difference. Hey, just them borders, mate. Them borders.
Imaginary lines, man. I don't get it.
No, it's that's the one good thing about being in Australia. It's one place. Let's just face it. We're not at the moment. We're definitely not at the moment. But in general, Australia, you can travel anywhere, and no one's going to stop you. So there's certain things on the west coast of Australia that are cheaper, being that they come in like not inverts, but some fish. But in general, corals pretty much are the same price most places in Australia. So because they collect what's local to them.
Now that's the other question. Like, could you? I'm sure it's legal, but collect your own coral. Like, if you're out there, like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Would you be allowed to, or is that like highly illegal? Like, you have to have a permit to do it. I'm assuming.
Highly illegal, but at the same time, if no one sees you, but it's not worth. It's really not worth it. Like you go out and see this amazing reef, the last thing you want to be thinking about is taking a chisel and chiseling a bit of coral off.
One day I want to come dive
Admittedly,
with you.
last time I was there and I accidentally bumped a like huge Monty plate and snapped like this little tiny bit off the side, and I felt like horrible all day about it. I'm like, hey, I just probably made a new colony on the ground. It's all good. So it's one of them
Propagation.
things, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely would be highly frowned upon, 100%, even in the hobby over here.
Yeah, for sure. I figured so.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I get this picture of like diving
It's
some
starting to
amazing
get
reef.
so
You're like, I want
expensive.
that, I want that, I want that.
I've thought about it a few times. It's getting that expensive, but no, you need a license to go out to collect, be it marine fish, be it inverts or coral, and they have certain quotas for the year, obviously, and all that kind of jazz. So
Yeah. All right. One day I'll visit and come dive it with you. It'd be amazing.
we shall do that, my sir.
All right.
It shall be fun.
So, what coral have you lost that you've regretted or has made you sad? Which one?
I've lost heaps.
Yeah. But what was your
That I've
favorite? Like,
regretted.
what hurt the most? What were you like, no?
I didn't lose it, but I didn't buy it. And that was my biggest mistake. When I would say there's plenty of pieces of coral that I've lost. One of the first that comes to mind is when I first started a Gold Rush Monty. It was a massive piece of Gold Rush Monty. I lost that because I didn't know what alkalinity was and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, you move on from that. The one piece I regret losing the most, and I didn't lose it in a sense that I lost it from a tank, but I didn't get it at the time. There was this chalice that would have been about bigger than my head, literally bigger than my head.
Yeah.
Rainbow as all hell. This thing was absolutely amazing. But I'd only been reefing for a couple of months, and I'd heard that chalices were a bit harder to keep and all that kind of stuff. It was $75, so that was a massive investment back then. So I didn't want to do it.
And now you're like almost free.
Now that thing would be worth a few $1,000s at a minimum. So if I had have had it in my system for the last however many years, I would have made thousands off that thing. So that's probably one of the things I regret losing the most.
That's fair. What's your favorite coral that you have now?
No, hey, you got to interview me, and then people got to come watch me. No, my channel.
Hey, I linked your channel.
I got to get my butt into gear and actually do something with that. I've got so much footage sitting there. It's compiled so much that it's now hard to deal with because there's so much there. It's hard to find what I need to find.
Well, so it should be easy to just bust out videos now because it's already there. Just edit and post. So did you know that I linked to your channel description and people are going to check it out later? So now you have the pressure on to actually put out some content.
There's no pressure there. Like, come on, you want to subscribe or you don't. I'll eventually put out videos. I like to put a little bit of effort into my videos. If you enjoy music, then you'll probably enjoy my videos. If you don't, then probably don't bother.
Fair enough.
No, because that's what I used to do, a bit of DJing, and that's kind of one of the things that got me into video production. Was I really enjoyed editing to videos, to music, should I say? So that's one thing that keeps me going in the game. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be creating content. So
fair enough. Ooh, nice.
That's so many copyright strikes. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I've learned, and I just pay for the copyright royalty-free music so I don't get in trouble.
80% of the stuff is fine, but then you get hit 4 years later when they decide to put a royalty on it.
I know, eh? What the heck? Oh well, what can you do? All right, so lesson of the day. At least dip your corals if you want to be extra hardcore and you have the time, willingness, and space. Even better
dip,
to quarantine.
I'd say, is a minimum.
It is.
Dip is a minimum. It's what? It's over there, $10 a bottle of this or something. If you can't afford that, as we said before, you're definitely in the wrong hobby. Like 100%, just turn around and just run because you got no chance. I'm just being honest.
Fair enough. I heard fire shrimp in Australia are super rare. Are they rare there for you?
Yeah.
Are they really expensive?
So fire shrimp and goby pair, super expensive. So what's the other?
Shrimp? Do you mean pistol shrimp and goby pair?
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah, we don't get them much over here. I've only ever seen 2 pairs in the whole reefing, the whole time I've been reefing. And that might just be where I'm shopping, but at the same time, they're definitely not abundant. That's for sure.
Hmm.
But I think the last set I saw was 3,500.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why I'd never consider that.
Yep, agreed.
So stupid expensive. So there's certain things that are really kind of unobtainable apart from the 1% over here. But hey, there's plenty of other things that we can afford. So just buy them.
Yeah, like A cans, almost free.
They're really not actually. We had a bunch of bad weather and it wiped out a lot of the acans in the wild actually. Not a
Really?
lot of, but a
Enough.
big sections of acans. So they
Yikes.
hadn't really been collecting as many. They're starting to trickle through, but you look at some of my colonies that I got, for instance, for $100 6 months ago, and the same thing would be $200 in the shop today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Crazy. What is his channel? His channel is Rookie Reefer, and it is also in the description below this video. So check it out.
It's a disclaimer. I'm a rookie. I always will be.
Rookie for life.
That's it, mate. That's it.
You can be
Hey, if it's a disclaimer in the name, like people can't get upset at you. It's like inappropriate reefer,
Yeah.
isn't it? Like,
Yeah,
hey,
perfect.
I told you my channel's called this. Why come here expecting something else?
You can be
But
a
no.
highly skilled rookie. It's fine.
That's exactly right. Hey, we're all rookies. We've all got something to learn. It doesn't matter who you are. Obviously, there is that one person who's up top of everything, but it doesn't really
No,
matter who you
there
are.
isn't.
There's always something to learn.
Everyone is always learning in this hobby because stuff is changing. Collectively, we're learning something new like every day. So you're always learning.
And this hobby includes so much. You can be a chemist, you can be a plumber, you can be you be all sorts. So
No, so true. All right, buddy. It's been, what are we at? Like, I don't know, quite a while. So
yeah, speaking of having a full tank, I've got to go collect, I think, about 7 pieces of coral. So
nice.
from Brisbane. I'll send you some pictures later.
Excellent. I appreciate it. All right. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it today. If you did, as always, hit that like button. Want to check out the Rookie Reefer? Link is in the description below. Otherwise, yeah, catch you guys on next week's live stream. Thanks, guys. Thanks.